In this section, we will transfer files to a remote system. We've used the SSH command to connect to a remote system and issue specific commands. In this case, listing the contents of the temp directory on server1.example.com. If I want to copy files from my local directory to the remote server, I cannot use the SSH command. I can, however, use a variety of other utilities to transfer files to that remote system. Several of those utilities even use the SSH service for how they connect and authenticate. One of those commands is the rsync command. Rsync will connect to the remote SSH service, so we can use some of the same syntax and configuration files that we use with SSH. So with rsync, it's similar to the local CP command. I give a local file that I want to copy, or multiple files, in this case my gedit-fix files from my local directory. But when I specify my destination, I'm going to specify the user I want to authenticate, the system I want to transfer to, putting a colon at the end. It's possible to use rsync locally in place of the CP command. If I leave off the colon, rsync will think that this is just a local directory where I want to sync these files to. When I add the colon on the end, then rsync recognizes that server1.example.com is a host name where I should connect to, and the student at portion says who I should connect or authenticate as. After the colon, I can specify exactly where on the remote system I want my files to be placed. If I leave it blank, put nothing after the colon, rsync will place the files in the home directory of the user that I'm authenticating as, in this case student. If I do specify a path, it's either relative to student's home directory or it's an absolute path, for example /tmp. Rsync will prompt for a password because it is connecting to the SSH service, so it'll use the same authentication that we used with SSH. In order to see that the files have been transferred, I can use the same SSH command that I used earlier and see that the gedit-fix files have been transferred to the remote system. I can also use rsync to copy an entire directory. For example, using tilde to specify my home directory, I'll place these files in the same location, server1, in the temp folder, and try and sync my entire home directory, in this way making a backup of my home directory on a remote system. Rsync, however, says it's going to skip the directory student. Rsync again works very similar to the CP command, so if I want to use this command to copy a directory, I need to specify an option, either a -r for a recursive option, or the -a for the archive mode, which does include the recursive and a couple of other options related to archiving file. With this command, once I give the password, it appears to have successfully synced, and I can go back to my SSH command to view the temp directory on the remote system and see that I have a student folder, and I can also view that particular directory and see the contents compared to my local directory and see that the various files and directories did get copied to the remote system. One of the advantages of the rsync command is that it will do an incremental copy. Now that I have an initial copy of my home directory, if I was to modify my home directory and then do the rsync again, it will only copy those files that have changed or the new files. So for example, let's make a copy of the etc host file into my home directory, and this time we'll run the same rsync command, and what it should do is just copy that host file, since that's the only change that has occurred. In order to see this a little better, I'm going to go ahead and add one other option to my rsync command, the v option for verbose. After I give the password for the remote system, I see the information that rsync has given me because of the verbose option that says it's sending an incremental file list, and it's just sent the student host file. In fact, it sent about 9,000 bytes. The total size is much larger. This is the size of all of the files that needed to be synced, but because many of them were already on the remote system, there was no need to transfer them across the network again. The speed up is related to the amount of time that is saved based off of using less bandwidth, because it only copies the incremental files or the files that have actually changed. rsync does have a man page. Man page also indicates that this is a fast, versatile, remote, and local file copying tool. For local copies, we simply specify a source and a destination without the host : syntax. What I demonstrated was access via remote shell, specifically a push where the host : syntax is part of the destination. You can also do a pull where you use the host : syntax as part of your source. rsync does have its own daemon, which could be running on a remote system. This is the traditional TCP rsync daemon, which is a plain text or unencrypted communication. So using the access via remote shell has the advantage of connecting to SSH and being an encrypted communication for both the authentication and the file transfers. There is one other command that's very popular for transferring files across the network and making use of the SSH server, and that is the SCP command. The SCP, or Secure Copy command, comes in the same package as SSH. It's a part of the Open SSH Clients package. It uses a lot of the same syntax as the SSH command as well, and the same configuration files, because it does connect to a remote SSH service. Like the CP and rsync commands, it requires a -r option if you want to copy a directory recursively, and it needs a source and a destination. Like the rsync command, it allows the use of the user@host : syntax to indicate the remote system in either the source or the destination. SCP, however, would go ahead and copy all of the files with each instance that we run it, whereas the rsync command did that incremental list and saved bandwidth by only copying the files that had changed. rsync, SCP, and several other commands can be used to copy or transfer files across the network to a remote system.